In some of the wines you can almost taste some of the heat and the dryness. You know, I think you taste it in some of the tannins. Yeah. They're kind of compact and you know, there's a bit of dryness on the finish, but I don't think it detracts too much from the best wines. They're well managed. I really enjoyed the 2018 Barbarescos. I think I appreciate the freshness, the directness, and just the flow a lot of them had across the palate. It was really good. Looking at the Langhe Nebbiolos of 18, 19 and 20, it seems that you get the impression that the region is moving in a more of a direction of elegance and transparency and purity, which is really encouraging.
Interesting, very varied. I focused on Barolo because I've got to write about it soon, and I was impressed. You still get quite a bit of tannin, but the aromatics are just glorious. You know, the wines that smell of incense. And the blood and roses I've never quite been able to get on Barolo, but herbs and incense and the feeling of walking into a cool wood on a hot day sometimes. It's magic.
What I found absolutely fascinating was, first of all, the subtle variations between the wines that I tasted, but also increasingly I'm finding that the best wines from the region have a perfume and a silkiness and a generosity that is a move away from the austerity and the hard structure that I used to associate with the region. In the past, I always felt that these were wines for cellaring and laying down for a long time before they were approachable. But I've been really surprised by how accessible these wines are, even in their youth, although the very best of them will inevitably go on to age for a long time.
I'm just halfway through this tasting at the moment, which thank you very much for putting on. Three things have excited me. Firstly, how the Nebbiolo delle Langhes, there's a fantastic opportunity there for a whole range of lovely, lovely flavours. Freshness is immediately evident right away from at a year old. But at a couple of years old, the freshness stays and a fabulously interesting maturity comes in to play as well. And that's really very special.
Langhe Nebbiolo has amazing individuality. And that's, I think what do I know? I think what people want these days is something that tastes of itself, that is unlike anything else. There's a great deal of sameness. Langhe Nebbiolo has something that other wines don't have. And of course, Barolo is unlike anything else in the world. You taste it and you think, ah.
The Barolo 17 vintage has the reputation of being a hot vintage. When I actually taste the wines in bottle, and indeed when I taste them in barrel or in botte, I was struck by how fresh, how balanced, how unhot they tasted. And I think what we're seeing in 2017 is we're seeing an inflection point in the progression of Piemonte generally, where we have a lot better understanding of viticulture, a lot better understanding of vinification, of timing, of all the details that go to making fine wine. And so despite the climate change, we're seeing the ability to retain elegance, complexity, and also typicity of terroir.
Well, I think 2017, in spite of the fact that it was, written about a great deal as being hot and dry vintage, I think there are some really lovely wines. There's some really delicious ripe fruit there, which is very appealing. Some elements are in the aromas of 2011, let's say, but with more tenacity. And I really love I think some of the best producers have produced excellent wines in that vintage.
Langhe Nebbiolo, I think, is particularly from estates, are a remarkable introduction to the quality of the region. I think if you look at the comparison you make in the UK, which is Bordeaux, where you've got endless sort of third wine, second wine, first wine, etc. The Langhe Nebbiolos are of a different level. I mean, you're seeing, particularly with the estates, you're seeing wines with an enormous amount of complexity and concentration. You know, often to do with younger vines or a selection from the crus. And I think they're a remarkably good value. And I think it's one of those things that'll probably not last for long, but at the moment we're seeing some fantastic quality.
I love some of the Barbarescos because they've got that nervy, edgy, vibrant quality of Barbaresco. And you always wonder, well, is it down to the slightly cooler, fresher 18, or is it down to the fact that they're Barbaresco? You know, but I think that identity is very clear, and there's a nervosity and energy to them which is very exciting. Again, always with the best ones in mind. There's a finesse to these salty, slightly sapid tannins.
Tannins, we go on and on about Nebbiolo tannins all the time, but if you don't search for the tannins, if you don't try and pull them out of the depths, if you don't try and whack and bang them into shape, just let them be. These Nebbiolo tannins, honestly, the modern Piedmont reds are becoming more and more thrilling by the day.
I think what's really lovely about 2017 is that it gives the consumer to experience all that's great about Barolo and Barbaresco in actually a comparatively youthful state. And overall, I was really impressed by the balance of the wines, the freshness of the fruit, the real kind of lovely Italian quality of all that sort of food-friendly quality. And I think really some superstars in the 2017 vintage.
When you look at Langhe Nebbiolo particularly, I think what you're seeing is an opportunity to get on board with some of the great quality of the region without paying the price of the Barolo name or indeed the crus. And if you're looking for the good producers, this is a way you can afford to understand what it is you could get if you actually pay twice the price. So I think, you know, what you're seeing today was an example of famous vintages, less famous vintages, but all of which show great quality.
I think these two vintages are not only good for the on-trade in terms of their accessibility, but also for the wine lover. I think it's very rare these days that people have the conditions in which to cellar a wine for 10, 12 years until it's approachable. Unless you have, you know, a big cellar or a vast country house where you can afford to put these wines in a nice, cool, quiet, dark place with the requisite humidity to allow them to age quietly. I think very few people have these facilities, and therefore the approachability of these wines is just a joy. It's so much better for the consumer and for the on-trade as well.
I tasted some 2018 Barbarescos that I absolutely loved, and I'm a huge Barbaresco fan. And I think that, again, it's this sense of the producers being super confident about the point of harvest and knowing that they have a grape that has the balance, the quality of the fruit that's just going to sing in the wine, and some really lovely examples of that.
Well, that's a very good question, because, you know, from a great variety as a Nebbiolo and such a challenging vintage, you know, it's that's what you see. You know, it's you see who works really well on the vineyards, who is unfortunately sometimes you got to say who is handling, you know, the grapes in the right way. So I think 17 shows really, you know, who is on the top. And today tasting was definitely, you know, an opportunity to see who is, you know, in the pole position on such a matter. Yeah.
Langhe Nebbiolo is really a great starting point for Barolo in the future, and actually I tasted a lovely 2020 that had all the lovely things about Nebbiolo. It had the charm, it had the freshness, the vivacity, the crispness, everything that we want of that grape when it's just at its absolute best. And I think that people shouldn't be looking at this as a region for only long-term aging, that in its youth it can be fun, it can be vivacious, and it can just be the wine that you want to drink.
My impressions of Barolo 2017 are really positive, actually, because even though we know it was a very hot year, what's fantastic about Barolo, and is it the terroir, is it the old vines, is it the extraordinary situation that the whole thing is grown in, they retain their fraîcheur, they're very fresh. There's a beautiful ripeness about the grapes in 2017, but they're not overcooked.